Totalitarianism. The colonial governor was not responsible to anybody in the territory. He might be responsible to a minister in Paris or in London, but he was certainly not responsible to the people on the ground. And so there was no model of democracy. We were not practicing Westminster model in Nigeria under colonial rule. We were practicing colonial dictatorship. And so the colonial people really had no experience, even of this so-called democracy that they were supposed to have inherited. They did not inherit anything of the sort. So it was, again, more than simply a question of people not living up to expectation. They really were not prepared. They were not trained for this.
Well, so candid an admission, once again, can play into the hands of the enemies of black Africa, because so many Westerners argue that, well, that's right, Mr. Achebe is right, that Nigeria was not ready for democracy.
Yes.
And because it can't handle democracy, we'd better stick with South Africa because they know how to keep order, to keep stability, to prevent communists from rising to power, whereas the governments of Africa and other black countries have not proven themselves up to the
Yes,
to the
well,
task.
that is, of course, totally spurious. The question of being ready, I would like to take that home, because you cannot, what I'm saying really is that you cannot become ready under colonial rule, because there was no attempt, there was no way, there was no, it was not part of the program to inculcate democracy. There's no way you can inculcate democracy through dictatorship, you see. So the colonial system in itself was the very antithesis of democracy. So no matter how long you stayed under it, you would not learn democracy. There was democracy in many parts of Africa before colonial rule came, you see. So to say, oh, let's keep ruling them until they learn democracy, it's really fraudulent.
Well, that's what is said in South Africa.
Yes, but of course, to say that the South Africans are doing the right, let's support them, since they're the only ones who understand democracy, comes down to not accepting that Africans are people. Because if you accept that Africans are people, you cannot possibly say that a handful of white people, a tiny minority of white people, should impose their will to the extent of depriving even elementary rights of self-expression. All the rights we know in the so-called democracies are denied, positively denied in this regime. And I say it is analogous to perhaps analogous to the Nazi regime in Germany. Now, for anybody to say that's the right thing for Africa, of course, shows that that person does not grant full humanity to Africans. And we know that there are such people, but we are not really going to listen to them, and they are not ultimately going to determine what happens in Africa.
You mentioned Africa before the colonial powers came. There's the opening line of your children's story, The Drum, which begins, "In the beginning, when the world was young." Does the artist in you ever wish you could start the whole story all over again? That you could go back?
Yes. Well, that is the whole strength, I think, of stories, and especially of children's stories. I'm happy you raised that, because we do need to learn, all of us, to learn to become like children again. Once in a while, we become so stiff. We're weighed down by so much knowledge, so much possession, so much special interest, that we lose the ability, the flexibility of children. Children can fly. Everything is possible to a child, and this is something which children's stories can do for us, and this is something I think we ought to learn. Again, we ought to keep ourselves young in that particular way.
You took a period of your life away from writing novels and wrote for children. Why?
Well, because I think it is very important. It is very, very important. I had some very interesting and very strange experiences too bringing up my own children. That really confirmed my fears about the danger, the predicament we were going through in not telling our children stories. You see, our fathers did, our grandfathers did, but once writing came, children, we more or less forgot that responsibility to tell children stories.
So what happened?
What happened was that all kinds of bad stories, all kinds of junk, again, it's like toxic waste again, being dumped. And I noticed my daughter, we were very young parents, so we really had no experience. And we used to go into the supermarket in Lagos and pick up a glossy, nice, big-looking, colorful story. We never read children's stories ourselves, so we didn't know what was in them. But then we discovered, my wife and I, that our daughter was beginning to have very strange ideas, you see. And it was at that point that we began to look carefully into what she was reading. And really, there was a lot of poison. There was a lot of poison there. Stories full of racism, full of all kinds full of ideas of Africa, again, as the other place, as the back of the world. And this is what we were feeding.
So you decided to...
So we decided. I decided then, well, I didn't decide then to write, but I knew then the importance of children's stories. And I knew that we were failing as parents in not bringing round the children after dinner, as our forefathers did, to tell them stories. I had not written any before. I didn't know how it was going to work, but I was ready to try. And that started me in that direction.
The power of reminiscing is very important to you.
Yes.
Why?
Yes. Well, if you look at the world in terms of storytelling, you have the warrior, you have the war drummer, the man who drums up the people. First of all, the man who agitates the people. I call him the drummer. And then you have the warrior, who goes forward, and fights. But you also have the storyteller who takes over to recount the event. And this is the one who survives, who outlives all the others. It is the storyteller, in fact, that makes us what we are, that creates history.
The memory.
Yes, the memory.
The continuity of the generations.
That's right, the memory which the survivors must have. Otherwise, their surviving would have no meaning.
The knowledge that others have suffered
here, have battled here. That is very, very important. And that is the meaning of Anthills of the Savannah. Yeah. You see, it is this memory, the memory that is necessary if surviving is going to be more than just a technical thing.
And what is it the anthill survives in order next year?
So that the new grass will have memory of the devastation of the savannah.
Of the fire.
Yes, the fire that happened in the savannah in the previous dry season.
So the anthill carries the memory to the grass, to the new grass.
Yes, yes.
To the new generation.
Yes, yes.
And weaves together a collective memory.
Yes.
So what you're saying is every survivor has an obligation to remember.
Yes, yes, yes.
What's that old Jewish saying that in remembrance is the secret of redemption?
I see, they're damn right, yes. Yes.
That's why you write?
Well, I didn't put it that way. I mean, I write partly because I enjoy it. But also, I think, because I knew that somebody had to tell my story. There's really, for me, we were at a period which is so different from anything else that had happened, that everything that was presented to us had to be looked at twice. I went through university, the first university in Nigeria, and we did a course in English literature, and we were taught the same kind of literature that British people taught in their own universities. They recommended books for us to read, but I began to look at these books in a different light. I realized suddenly